This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. All right, here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. David Neagle. Welcome to The Speaking Show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So you are, and I don't usually say this with a lot of our guests, but you are a legend. You are a legend in the coaching industry, in the coaching business, in the personal development business. You know, I always like to ask, well, how did David Neagle become David Neagle? In with like the bunny quotes. Yeah. So give us a little bit of a sketch of your professional journey that brought you to your work, and what were some of the interesting milestones along the way?
Well, you know, man, it has been a journey. You know, when you say legend, it's like, okay, that's fun to hear that, but it also reminds you like how long you've been doing something like this, right? You know, I was very fortunate that around the age of 27, I met somebody who kind of started to wake me up a little bit. I was very much looking for answers in my life. I had a lot of questions and very few answers, and most of the answers I had were wrong. And I was really headed in a bad direction. So through a series of little decisions that I made that swung really big doors in my life, I created an environment and an atmosphere that caused me to question everything that I believed in. I was a high school dropout. I was just making one decision after another that had severe consequences, not necessarily bad consequences, but severe consequences that I couldn't fulfill in my life. I got married young. I had 2 children. I had no education. My skill set was to drive a forklift or a tractor trailer truck. And I couldn't get out of my own way. I was very undisciplined, irresponsible with money. Like it was a mess. And I was looking for answers to how to turn this around. I realized I was making mistakes, and I realized that I was probably making horrible decisions, but I didn't know how to change it. And I didn't know where to look. Everywhere I turned, the answers I would get would be, well, you shouldn't have quit high school. And it was like, oh, yeah, you know what? I'm intelligent enough to realize that now. Thanks. What do I do now? And the answer was the same. Work hard. Just work hard. But, you know, obviously that was not getting me anywhere. So I had a couple of real big things happen in my life that kind of like smacked me upside the head and said, pay attention. One was in 1989, right after my son was born, I had a water skiing accident on the Illinois River, and I got sucked through a dam. And I was one of 2 people at that time that lived going through that accident. And they were so astonished that not only did I live, but I was not permanently injured from it, that they kept putting this idea in my mind. There must be a reason you're here. Like God's watching over you. There must be something that you're going to do in your life. You need to pay attention. Like, you know, somebody's watching you, like all that stuff. And I started to believe it. I didn't know how to mix reality with that from superstition, but regardless, I started to believe it. So I started looking for, well, where is this special thing that I'm here to do in my life? Because once my back healed, I broke my back. And once that healed, I went back to work. I'm back on a forklift again, and things are bad. They're not good. And a little while after I got back to work, it's progressively getting worse again. And one night I had this emotional breakdown in the back of a trailer that I was loading, and I just started crying. And I was asking God to please show me something, anything. I didn't know which way to turn. Show me something. So a little voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And I realized I'd been hearing that since I was a kid. You know, when I would get in trouble at school when I was a kid, or I would get poor grades, which was basically all the time, they would drag my dad into the school. And they would say, you know, Dave's a pretty smart guy. If he would change his attitude, he would probably get better grades. And I'd go home and get smacked around a little bit. Nothing severe, like he wasn't abusive or anything. But he would say, change your attitude, go to your room, stay there till your next report card and study your ass off. So I would do that, but nothing changed. And I guess nobody ever really said to me, David, here's how you change your attitude. Here's what it is. Here's where it needs improvement. Here's how to make improvement. Here's how to hold you accountable to the improvement. I didn't get that kind of parenting. My parents just didn't know. So I hear this voice that says, change your attitude. And I'm like, okay, maybe I better listen to this. And I start thinking, okay, well, what is an attitude? Like, what is this really? And how I could not get past this idea that how changing something in my mind, like my viewpoint of my work, how is that going to change anything in my results? Like, that doesn't add up to me. So I changed three things. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to try this, and I'll try it for 12 months and we'll see what happens. I'm going to act like I love what I do. I'm going to do every job to the best of my ability. And I'm going to treat everybody with total respect. Those were three glaring things in my life that I noticed as me being very weak and immature in. So I began to do that. To my astonishment, in 30 days, my income tripled. It went from 20,000 a year to 62,000 a year. Now, let me just go back and say this. I was getting fired from jobs. The day that I had the meltdown in the back of the trailer, I was reprimanded twice that day and had to fight off a suspension from work. For me to triple my income with a poor work record, no real verifiable good experience in anything that I was doing, really heading in a bad direction. I didn't even know anybody that was making 62,000 a year back in 1989. Oh, actually, this was like in 1990. 89 is when I had the accident. So I'm floored. I can't believe this happened. And I'm thinking to myself, somebody knows what I did, but I don't know what I did. Now, here's what I was being told by people. You're lucky. You got really lucky. Okay.
Was this a job change or what was it?
It was a job change, but it was kind of a lateral move, to be honest with you. So it was interesting. I worked for what at the time, I don't know about today, but back then I worked for the largest food importer in the country. And the guy had started the business in his garage. That's why I kind of related to him because I used him as a model to change my attitude. But we had like about 80 trucks in the yard, and then we had all these trailers, and they're refrigerated trailers. They both refrigerate and heat, right? So this is Chicago. It's all food products. It has to be temperature controlled. Most people don't realize how those trucks and those trailers get fuel in them. It's called on-site delivery. So a truck will come, a tanker, small tanker truck will come and will fill those things by hand. And that's how they get fuel in them. I didn't know that till I started working there. And this guy, his name was Drew Batty. He would come every Tuesday and Thursday and he would fill those trucks. And I got to be friends with him over a period of 2 years. So we're talking one day and he says to me, he said, "You don't like it here, do you?" I'm like, "Not really." He said, "Why don't you come work over by me?" Now, I got to tell you, everything in my body went into resistance when he said that. And the real reason was this. He was driving a fuel truck. In my mind, I'm thinking it's a bomb on wheels, right? That's what I'm thinking. It's a bomb on wheels. I want nothing to do with it. And I have all these other things, like he's out there when it's raining, at least I'm under the dock. He's out there in the snow, at least I'm under the dock. You know, I've got it better than him. And then my last comment to him was, "Drew, how much could you possibly be making doing this anyway?" And he said, "Well, last year I made 50,000. And it caused me to pause, right? Like it put my ego in check immediately. And I said, "I don't believe you." He said, "I'm coming Tuesday." He said, "I'll bring you my check stub. I'm not lying." I said, "You bring it to me." I didn't believe him. I thought that he was just totally BSing me. So he brings it to me, and sure enough, he had. So I had to talk through some things to kind of get it comfortable in my mind. And there was another threat. This was in the fall. This company that I was thinking about going to work for traditionally laid people off because about 80% of their fueling was construction equipment. So not only did they fuel trucks, they fueled construction equipment and they fueled the railroad locomotives. And they had just got that account, by the way, the locomotives. And so he said, "It's a union company. You're going to be in the bottom of seniority. You could get laid off 3 weeks. You could get laid off 6 months. I can't tell you." He's like, "So it's a risk." And I remember asking people like my uncle, I'm like, "What do you think?" He said, "I would stick where you get all the overtime." So nobody was really encouraging me to do this. Plus, I was married and I had children and it was like, what do I do if I get laid off? Anyway, long story short, I make the leap. I do that. Instantly, my income goes up. I'm floored. I'm floored by the idea also that this opportunity had been around me for 2 years and I never saw it as an opportunity. I'm literally questioning my own intelligence at this point. Like, I know I'm not a stupid person, but how does something like this exist around me for this long and I don't see the opportunity? And I'm dying to change my opportunity. Like every day I would sit down with a bologna sandwich at lunch and a pop, and I would sit down there with a pen and a calculator and try to figure out, how do I make more money? How do I make more money? It wasn't like I wasn't trying to make an effort to change. I was looking for anything that I could do. I literally went out and I saved up $2,000 I bought an old Chevy Blazer with a plow on the front of it because I could make more money plowing gas stations in the wintertime than I could in overtime. So if we were having a big snow, my wife would call me at work and she would be like, don't take the overtime tonight. Come home and plow. And I would go home and plow and make a couple of $100. And overtime, I was making like 50, So I would do anything. Work ethic was not my issue. So I'm trying to figure out, how does this happen? How does this change all of a sudden happen? I'm astounded by it. And I start studying. And the first person that I studied was Tony Robbins. I came home one night, and his infomercial's on with Fran Tarkenton. It's when he first started running his infomercials. I get his program. I hear him talk about all the books that he's read. He starts mentioning them. I start getting books. And I turn my car into a mobile library because I had to drive 100 miles to work each way every day. 100 miles to work, 100 miles home. I used this time very wisely. I was all books on tape, seminars on tape, lectures on tape, biographies on tape, anything that I could get on tape. And I listened to it over and over and over and over again. So it took me a period about 7 years of studying. Around 1996, 97, I met my mentor, and my life began to change very rapidly. Now, here's what I didn't know. This whole time I'm studying, I don't realize that I'm passionate about what I'm learning. I think I'm passionate about the possibility of the change, which I was, but I was also passionate about the material that I was learning. I couldn't get enough of it. And it was like an addiction. Like, it literally was like an addiction. My mentor was the one that woke me up to the idea that I wasn't studying this just to make a change, but it was actually my life's purpose. That took a big shift in my mind to make that shift. But in 1999, I had a long conversation with him, and I decided, he's basically said, David, it's just a decision. Because I had been going through a period of time where I was waking up in the middle of the night, 2:20 every morning for a year. This happened. And a voice in my head said, if you want to live your dream, you have to leave. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what I was supposed to leave. I was very confused by this. And he was the one that told me, he's like, you're not going to know until you do what God told you to begin with, which is leave. And I was scared to death. And that made no sense. It didn't follow any of the rules of responsibility that I had ever heard about. But I did. I took a chance. I'm like, I really want to see if this really works. If everything that I'm learning is really true. Could I really get a message like that from God or spirit or the universe, whatever you want to call it, and it really be directing my life? And sure enough, it was. I left. A month later, I got this opportunity to start my company, and I never looked back. And that was 21 years ago this year. And it's been an amazing journey. I can't even fathom what my life would be like had I not made those decisions back then. And it's kind of like Steve Jobs says, right? You can only connect the dots looking backwards. You can't connect the dots looking forward. I mean, every decision I made, it was like you're making it blind. Here's something you want, or here's an opportunity, but you have no idea how any of this is going to work out. You just have to have the faith and make the decision and move into it. And that's what I did.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. So you went from like this $60,000 job driving a truck to no income, set up a coaching shingle, and go.
Yeah, I wasn't even coaching at the time. I wasn't even coaching. I was doing seminars and speaking. Seminars and speaking was the first thing that I did. Coaching came maybe 2 years into it, a year and a half into it.
What was the topic or what was the subject matter? I mean, you just sort of wrote your own professional development, keynote, seminar day training?
I wasn't even that complicated. So what happened was, as I was learning this, I was teaching it to other people, just like friends, people that I would come across. We were like, how are you continuing to have one success after another? Because it was almost like I had developed the Midas touch. Everything I touched turned to gold. It was really bizarre. I mean, I couldn't explain it. But I was teaching people what I was learning. And the ones that applied it had the same results. Then I would get excited for them, right? And when somebody was struggling, I'd be so excited because I could help teach them something that would actually have a profound difference in their life. So when I went through this year of waking up with this voice in my head that said, if you want to live your dream, you have to leave. At that point in time, I was coaching with my mentor, but I didn't tell him that this was happening. There were two reasons I didn't tell him. One, I realized, the other one I didn't realize. One was because I had reached the stage where I was really trying to figure things out on my own, because I knew, like, I can't have this guy here forever. I need to learn how to make decisions on my own. But I was not making any progress with this. So I went and had a meeting with him and told him, but I didn't tell him that I had made the decision to leave. I just listened to what he told me, and then I went back home. So when I made the decision to leave, he did not know this. And it was a month after I had made that decision that he phoned me and he said, how would you like to have your own business and be a facilitator for my Science of Getting Rich seminar? He said, I'll teach you how to teach it. I'll teach you how to sell it, which it was arguable. I mean, he definitely taught me how to teach it. And you could start your own business and you could start there. And I was like, okay, I think I could do that, right? So that's what I had. I had a product that I could teach and sell. All the business stuff I had to learn on my own. But I definitely had a product I could teach and sell. And then I bought the rights to be able to teach all of his programs and products. So that's how I started. Now, here was the thing. I was doing so well. I was putting more people in seats in seminars than any of the other facilitators that he had sold at the time. And he asked me to come to his company and teach those people how I was doing it. So not only was I doing that, but then I started doing some work for him. He would call me and he would say, can you help us out? Like, can you help sell this seminar that I'm doing? And I would be like a rock star and sell out half of it, and his other salesman would sell out the other half. So after about 2 years of that, he said, let's go into business together. And we started another company. And that was like the next level of my mentorship, because I got to travel with him around the world and speak and teach seminars with him and actually know him as a friend and a business colleague and really move that needle forward. And then what I did was I started creating my own material after that and started doing my own thing. So I did that with him for a few years. And as I was doing it, I slowly started to develop my own material. And he said to me in the beginning, I said, well, how does this look, like future-wise? Like, what does it look? He said, well, you'll probably do the same thing that I did with Earl Nightingale. He said, you'll do my stuff for a few years, and then you'll want to put your own flair on it, and you'll start teaching your own stuff. He said, and then you'll move into your own thing. He says, that's basically what I did, because he worked for Earl for 5 years. You know, that was the journey. That's exactly what happened. I did his stuff for a couple of years, and then I did really well and started doing my own. And then we had a company with him. I mean, it was great. I was like a kid in a candy store. Like, my whole life changed like night and day, you know? So that was what happened.
So tell us a little bit about this kind of sales DNA, because obviously, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, sales and selling principles are the same, technology, social media, whatever. Were we cold calling? Were we mailing? Were we going to networking meetings? How did you fill the seminars back pre-Facebook and pre-pay-per-click ads and so on?
It was speaking. For a couple of years, I was in a network marketing company in the mid-90s. And I had gotten out of it, but I was still training people that were in those companies. And I knew people from other companies. That's where I started. I started going to network marketing companies, and I went to their downlines. And I would get to come out and speak to their groups of people. And then I would sell them into seminars. But I also was going door to door to places like State Farm, Metropolitan Life, Prudential Insurance, and real estate agents. And I was getting business both there, corporate, and I was also getting it like in the MLM world. As you know, the internet was in its infancy back then, right? So I didn't know anything about the internet. I mean, I remember my wife had put up this really cheap little web page, my first webpage. I had a goatee, like it was, it was really wild, but no mailings. It was a lot of cold calling, and I was a workhorse with it. Like, I would call 12, 15 hours a day, just call people, get lists of people from different network marketing companies. Eventually I worked with all the big network marketing companies around the world. Like, I was one of the top speakers for years that went in there. And then I decided to move away from that and start to focus just on entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Wow. So really, it was speaking as the lead generator. It was speaking and selling from stage and enrolling people in the next step.
Right.
Was it like a 2-step seminar kind of model where the first one's free and then they come to a paid seminar?
No, I would just go speak for whoever would let me come speak. I would go anywhere if they would let me come speak.
Right.
Then I got good enough to where they would literally either pay me to come speak or they would pay for all my travel, first class travel to come speak, which was really good when that happened because it kind of covered your nut going into it. I would just go speak and then I would immediately sell them into a seminar. I mean, it was exactly from the stage to my own event. And I had an extraordinarily high closing rate in most rooms.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you've also written some books along the way. Talk about how that publishing journey sort of parallel tracked your rise and ascent in the speaking and coaching world.
Yeah, so there were two things. One was over the period of time I was writing a book that it proved that I needed some help on because I'm really not a writer. I mean, I can put some ideas down, but when you're authoring a book, it's something else. So I had a friend of mine who was a pretty decent writer help me ghostwrite The Millions Within. And I was sitting down, there was a congress that I was speaking at, an event that I was doing in Vegas. And I was meeting with a bunch of people and colleagues. We were having this big steak dinner. I think it was at Caesars. And we were throwing ideas around the room, around the table that night. And somebody said, what do you need? And I was like, I don't know that I need anything right now. My partner said, well, what about the name of the book? And I was like, oh yeah, we were struggling with the name. So we were throwing ideas around and they said, what does David do? A colleague of mine said, David helps people find the millions within. And I was like, that's the name of the book. So that's how that one came out. And then The Art of Success was interesting because The Art of Success started as a 4-hour talk that I was doing for a friend of mine back around 2005 or 6, I think it was, which then expanded into a full seminar. It's a full seminar that I do today. It's a full 3-day seminar, but we also did it in a book form. So we had The Art of Success, The Art of Success 2. The second part's not a book, but then it went into that. And I'm currently working on a third book, which has been just put on hold since the COVID thing, because there was some other research that I needed to do to travel to do it. So, but yeah, there's even a third one that's in the works now.
And now you also have a very successful podcast. Talk a little bit about where the podcast fits into your strategy and how you're leveraging that and what that has brought to the table.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So first off, understand this. I started the podcast 2 years ago with just the idea that I wanted to try it, okay? I wanted to take my teachings and put them out there for people that basically couldn't afford to come. I just wanted to reach more people. I had no other strategy besides that. God's truth, I really didn't. We had no equipment really to do it. I mean, we had, microphones and stuff from the seminars that we did, but we were in the ballroom of my office. It's like a little teaching space. And me and who's my director of podcast now, Brandon Tuss, he just started recording me. And I would come in once a week and we would do this and we'd put it up. So then as we're putting it up, we're getting email after email after email. They want more, they want more. So I started increasing the amount of episodes that I was doing. But there was something really bizarre that happened that we did not expect to happen. People were coming to the company and buying, not through any other marketing, but through the podcast. And they were coming to seminars. Not only were they coming to seminars, they were coming to seminars and buying our high-ticket items without ever having met me before. And we found out that they were coming through the podcast. So really, I mean, now we have marketing for the podcast, but we don't sell anything through the podcast. It's just to help to get the word out there. But when we first started, it was all by word of mouth. That's all it was, by word of mouth. And it's growing well. It's growing very nicely. I mean, we just went over 1 million downloads. And you got to understand, for the first year, 13 months, we didn't put any effort into expanding the word on that thing at all.
Wow, really amazing. So tell us, because I know that your podcast there's a couple of different formats and a couple of different types of episodes. When you started it, was it just going to be kind of David's sound bites? Like you said, go into the ballroom, turn on the microphone, David starts to rant. Then it's oh, let's do some interviews. Oh, let's do some summary episodes. How did the format start to evolve? And how did you know I want to talk to guests versus I just want to put this value out there?
Yeah. So it started off with me doing about a 30-minute teaching. That's all I was doing, was a series of 30-minute teachings. Some were longer, some were shorter, but they were all around 30 minutes. And then once we started to get a lot of questions, Brandon had the idea of doing something called Inside the Episode, where he would literally, while I was teaching, he would sit there and write questions that came to his mind. And then we would do another episode on him interviewing me about the episode that I just did, which people actually, they love it. They love inside the episode. It helps answer questions that they're not getting answered. So then I thought, I really want to play with this because I had been intrigued by the idea that if this thing had any legs whatsoever, I would actually like to do interviews, but I really, and which I'm still not there yet, I have a goal to do long form interviews. I really want to do conversations instead of just sound bites or pitches for somebody's book. Because I want to get deep into conversation with people that are seriously doing things in the world. So it's starting to move into that direction now. But yeah, that's how those things got developed. So we're playing with stuff right now, and for the most part, people love it. They send in recommendations. They're always telling us how much they love the thing. And, we have to push them to get critical feedback, but they do send critical feedback on certain things, which we really appreciate.
And it's the Successful Mind podcast. We'll
That's
talk
correct.
more about that at the end and share some links and all kinds of cool things. But what an interesting evolution. I mean, I love the behind the scenes. I love the sort of like the meta level about, hey, here's what's going on in this episode. Listen for this. And I was curious about that. I wanted to really, talk more about this. And I get a lot of questions on that. Really, really smart. I mean, it's like a 3-layer enchilada, right? There's the teaching, there's the discussion of the teaching, and then there's also, some guests and some other perspectives that you can bring in. Really great. By the way, that whole kind of deeper conversation thing, total disaster. Don't do it. We're already at 200 episodes and this thing is a train wreck. So, please don't do it.
Don't do
it. Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. I want to go back to some of the core teachings, because you said earlier that it wasn't about, and you also say this on the website and your blogs and in a lot of your material, you work with people who have tried strategy after strategy, tactic after tactic, and they've come to their own realization, it ain't the strategy. Mm-hmm. It ain't the tactic, much like you sitting there in the forklift saying, it must be me. It must be something I'm doing or something I'm missing. In the personal development and coaching industry, we sometimes say, man, everyone needs help with mindset. Mindset is the toughest thing to sell. Talk about that, because obviously, and I know that mindset is 99.5% of the game. There might be another 0.5%, but people don't necessarily seek, oh man, I wish I could find an awesome coach to help me with my mindset. How does that surface for most of the clients that end up coming to you? And then how do you address it as the foundational building block upon which everything else rests?
Well, I agree. Especially when I started the company, people just did not want to buy mindset. It was not forefront in their thinking. We are raised to kind of deify the intellect around the world. So people are always like, what do I do? What do I do? I need to change what I do. It can't be what I'm thinking. As human beings, we still have not made that connection of how powerful our own thought process and who we're actually being as we show up for life every day actually matters. So what I did was I recognized that right away. And I was like, okay, I know that they will accept the mindset if I can show the correlation between the mindset and the results that they're getting. So I would talk to them about the results that they were getting. And of course, once you started talking about the results, immediately you would see the frustration come out and they'd be an open book. They would tell you about all the things that they tried or they're doing, and they're just not getting there. So that would be the conversation. And I would say, here's exactly what I would say in the very beginning when I started. And it's not much different today. A little more organized, but not much different. I'd be like, everything that you're creating in your life is the result of your belief systems. And when you change your belief systems, you'll change your results instantaneously. It does not have to take a long time. And I would tell them the story of how I changed, and I would tell them other stories, anything that seemed to relate, that they could actually relate to based on their life experience or what they were doing. And they were like, okay, let me see how that works. So, basically that's really it. Now, today, I think it's a little bit different. Mindset's everywhere. It has exploded. What's unfortunate is that most of the people that are teaching mindset today really haven't done a damn thing. I mean, they know it is a concept, but they've never integrated it into any kind of behavior.
Yeah, for sure. One of my early mentors, I was full of questions about tactics and strategy. And I kept asking, well, how would that work? And how do I do that? And how do I get started? What's the first step? And at one point, he just got frustrated with me and he just stopped me and he said, David, how is the least interesting question? You need to stop asking all these how questions. You need to focus on what. What is the outcome? What is it you want to create? Who do you want to serve? Why do you want to serve? Once you answer some of those bigger what and why and who questions, the how almost always takes care of itself. And I was like, yeah, great. How do I do that? And it's a hard habit to break.
Yeah.
But until you take that one step back, you can't make that leap 5 steps forward like you have and like I have and like some of our clients have. So I love what you're saying, that it's so baked in. It's almost like asking a fish about the water. Fish can't see the water because that's just what the fish is swimming around in.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you've also coached and mentored some of the world's best coaches and mentors. Going back to your Earl Nightingale story and you studying with your mentor, and then obviously people that are working with you going on and having very successful multi-million-dollar coaching and training and speaking businesses. Who's your sweet spot client? Who do you want to have in your virtual audiences and live audiences once that comes back? And who's the ideal demographic that you really want to help?
Well, we primarily focus on entrepreneurs. That is kind of the nugget where we focus. But the truth is, from a client base, we have people from kind of every walk of life. It depends on what they want. We definitely specialize, and part of our message is that we can help you, explode your income, turn your annual income into a monthly income, earn whatever you want, And we have an amazing record of people that we've taken 7, 8, 9, 10 figures in their businesses. However, it's interesting because sometimes we get people who really have mastered the money part of it, but there's other areas of their life that they have not. And they want to understand the mindset, and they will pay big money to come in and just actually learn that and apply it to whatever area. There's no specific agenda as far as what area it is. But to answer your question, it's basically business owners and entrepreneurs. And the reason is because I did work with all kinds of people in every facet of life. Really, I wanted to work with people that had the ability to make a difference. They were already showing that they were doing something to make a difference on the planet. I mean, not that I won't work with people, but if a person's not really going to do something, they're missing a big piece of the mindset, because the mindset is not just mindset. It's how do I apply the mindset to what it is, that I'm actually doing, but what is the proper order and to do that. So that's where we enjoy to work with people the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you just a couple final quick questions. My next question is kind of this hall of mirrors, right? The coaches and then the coaches behind the coaches. And I wrestle with this, and I think almost everyone who's in the thought leadership business wrestles with this. People come to us, some of them specifically because they would like to become us or become like part of our business model, right? We are their spirit animal, so to speak.
Right.
We're a coach, we're a consultant, we're a speaker. They want to become a coach like David Neagle, a speaker like David Neagle, and so forth. And they're very open that there's no mystery, there's no, manipulation around this. They're very clear about this. It takes a very big, very secure personality to take that person on and say, I will help you. I will give you everything that I have, knowing in the back of your mind, this little voice saying, I might be creating a competitor. I might be creating someone who, number one, might even be more successful than me. Mm-hmm. And maybe even I hope they are, because that's why we're here, right? And or who might at some point, be a competitor to me, and someone decides, hey, do I sign up with David Neagle? Do I sign up with Joey Schmedlap? And Joey Schmedlap's been a 10-year client for you, and he has his own beautiful big coaching consulting business. Like, wait a second, this other person, they just signed up with one of my mentees. How do you wrestle with that? Coaches mentoring coaches, experts mentoring experts, and not let that competitive mindset get in the way?
So it is a huge issue. It's a major issue. And it didn't used to be an issue, but you're right. I'm like, every time I help somebody who's a coach, we literally create competition. And sometimes that competition comes in, even though I don't think that this is ethical, they do it anyway. They'll come to your seminar just to take people that you've put into the seminar, right? However, If that person is going to go work with the individual who doesn't have the results yet, and they're going to convince themselves to pay all that money and go do that when they could actually get the real deal in front of them, it's not somebody I want to work with to begin with, right? They're trying to bargain with success, and you just can't do it. So here's what we actually see. People will do that crap. And then 3 years later, after they've spent a few $100,000 and got no results, then they'll come back around and they'll want to go through, for real, and they'll realize what it was that they did. I just try not to get messed up in it. I mean, you're not taking business away from me, because the one thing I know how to do is I know this business. I know this industry. I know how to sell. I know how to market. Our seminars are not short of people because there's other coaches out there. I think that it's probably actually the opposite. I would say that the only challenge that coaches really have today is there's so many of them. How do you actually be seen with any kind of difference with the competition that's out there? Because most coaches are putting, all they want to do is put pictures of somebody else's Ferrari up and, try to insinuate that it's theirs, but there's no substance behind it. You know what I mean? So I just tell people, look who has the results.
Yeah,
that's
very,
what you're
very
looking
powerful.
for. I mean, my results they're well documented. I've got an incredible history in our results. So all they have to do is research and you'll see.
Right, exactly. I love it. Talk a little bit about kind of where the business is now. We're sort of emerging, but not really, from COVID-19. What does your kind of post-COVID-19 business model look like? What are you excited about? What are you working on? How are you going to emerge into this new normal?
Well, I mean, basically what we've done is we've moved everything to a soundstage. We've moved the live events to a soundstage where we have monitors that we can interact through Zoom with hundreds or thousands of people. Yeah, it feels different, but it still has that great interactive quality to it. So that's what we're doing right now. Like, when it gets back to what it was, I have no idea. It looks like it's going to be this way for a while. So we've moved everything to it. I'm not worried about it. Our business is doing fantastic. I mean, our business has grown through the COVID thing. It's not anything that's affecting us other than, like my speaking career is down a little bit because, obviously we're not speaking, and that's a huge portion of what we do. But, I think in time, the world will rebalance itself to some degree, and we'll get back to some sense of what the new normal is and then figure it out from there.
I love that. Well, David Neagle, this has been absolutely brilliant. Let us know, how can people get connected and stay connected to more David Neagle brilliance? Where can we send people? We're going to link all that goody material under this episode at thespeakingshow.com. Where can we send people to get connected to you?
The Successful Mind podcast. That's the best place to learn about me because you get to experience me there. Of course, you go to my website, davidneagle.com. But if you really want to experience me, what I do, what I teach, how I do it, go to the Successful Mind podcast. It won't cost you a cent, and you can learn as much as you want. Then if you want to come meet us live, you're more than welcome to do so.
And live virtual, live in person, all good, both good, right?
Live virtual right now, but when it gets back to in person, then definitely in person.
I love it. Well, David Neagle, you're a gentleman and a scholar, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for sharing this massive, massive value with us today.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.